I want to highlight a few of the reasons I see for this, and this is where things get a bit complicated. First, South Africa's inward-looking history gave rise to a set of approaches to some very big and very important economic ideas that has made it hard to take advantage of them. In this list, I would include the importance of cross-border economic activity, trade and capital, how they impact on growth, and integration into global value chains. The cost on not being a more open economy are both large and pernicious, not least in nurturing a focus on import substitution rather than taking advantage of the knowledge creation and the spillovers associated with global markets. South Africa could have done better with the endowments it has. They are many, and there is quite a lot of domestic innovation here. But much greater diversification and much better outcomes certainly could have been achieved if we compare ourselves to other countries, and also across a much wider range of human capital. And I think this is an important point. A simple measure I like of success about our interaction with the global economy is whether or not it has helped the economy's overall size keep pace with population growth and the level of human capital. But as I noted above, our high level of unemployment shows that this just clearly has not been the case. Second, and in part because of our inward focus, we too actively manage or set rules for how our markets work at a microeconomic level. Price movements are there to signal to economic actors whether to produce, not to produce, create jobs or not, and so on. But we obscure such signals when we get regulatory controls wrong or when they cause prices to be fixed or move only in one direction. This fundamental challenge affects a wide range of critical markets, from labor to energy. In the labor market, it results in weak demand as prices cannot adjust for productivity. In energy, it results in excess demand and fixed supply. In both cases, the opportunity costs to the economy are very large, never mind the many social costs. My third area of concern is the balance between the public and the private. We like to argue a lot here about whether a reduction in the pace of growth in public spending is austerity or not. For what it's worth, this particular question is both well answered by the data and not terribly useful for making progress on economic growth. The right question is whether our public services are fit for purpose. That public services are necessary for economic growth and inclusion should really not be the subject of great empirical debate. More pragmatism about the role of the public sector, whether it should be bigger or smaller, is needed, and it should be based on measurable outcomes. We need to recognize that where outcomes of public services are poor, inclusion will be the very first casualty, in part because the private markets that are left over will discriminate between those able to pay and those that cannot. Again, this observation need not be overly contested, but it does and should place a burden on the public sector to modernize and improve what it does, including, at times, competing with the private sector. Public services should be focused on making economic inclusion as costless as possible. And that principle of measurable outcomes and the bar we're setting there about making inclusion costless as possible should extend throughout the public sector to all domains where they are appropriate and where they matter. This should include housing, this should include transport, this should include all facets of urban planning and many of the other spatial dimensions of our economic lives. Getting this right will have fundamental economic benefits, in my view, even if some of these are quite indirect, and we don't think about these often. In particular, I think a lot about how public services reduce the cost of labor supply, feeding eventually down the line into the competitiveness of exports or import competing goods and services. Better public services make the cost of economic activity lower, and this really needs to be a critical focus area.